right, good evening everyone. Welcome to the Parrish Art Museum. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces and some new ones. My name is Corinne Ernie. I'm the chief curator here at the Parrish, and it gives me great pleasure to be talking to Donald Sultan tonight. And Donald is one of 41 artists with very deep connections to the East End that we have invited to participate in a year-long exhibition series called Artists Choose Parrish. And that was in celebration of the 125th anniversary of this institution. And we tasked the artists with choosing works from the collection and show them alongside with their own works. And of course, for us curators to relinquish that kind of power is always challenging, but it's also incredibly rewarding when we work with artists because they always have a very different vision, and it also helps us to understand our own collection better when we see works together that we would not normally show together. So the show is up through February 4th, and the other part that is further up in the front is up through February 18th. And we do have another talk coming up on February 4th with Alice Aycock and Amy Oppenheim. So please come back for that. And there's one more seat up here in the front. Okay. So without further ado, let me introduce Donald Sultan. And we are actually sitting in his gallery, the gallery that he shows, the works that he chose, and from the collection and of his own work that he chose to show. So Donald Sultan was born in Asheville, North Carolina. He got his MFA from the School of the Art Institute in Chicago before establishing himself in New York in 1975. And since his solo debut in 1977, Donald has excelled as a distinguished painter, printmaker, and sculptor. Renowned for seamlessly merging traditional and modern elements, Donald's large-scale paintings, often classified as still lifes, present bold compositions employing industrial materials like tar and concrete, contributing to the unique texture and character of his pieces. Sultan's art, described by him as a blend of basic geometric and organic forms with a formal purity, has left an indelible mark on contemporary art. His subjects evolve organically, maintaining powerful statements amid abstraction. His work, showcased globally in solo and group exhibitions, is a part of prestigious permanent collections, including the Museum of Modern Art, the Dallas Museum of Art, and the Metropolitan Museum of Art, among many other museums. Welcome, Donald, and thank you for doing this conversation tonight.
Okay.
So I wanted to start with the process of going into our vault and selecting works from the collection. What was going through your head when you were in our collection, when you started thinking about what you wanted to show, both from the collection and of your own work?
Well, I didn't come down and look at the collection that much. I did it online.
Right.
And I went through the names of people whose work I wanted to see, and then I pulled up images of what they had in the collection. But largely, I wanted to narrow it down to individuals whose works were iconic in some way, and that they were complete, and they were you could absorb it as you looked at each one. And I wanted to also make a room in which it felt like you could live here.
It does feel like a living.
And it wasn't just a thing for viewing. It was a place where you could come and sit and contemplate the works. And so I didn't want too many works, but I wanted them to be of scale for what they are, and I wanted them to be precise. So I picked artists who did that, and also artists who have not shown that much, at least here in the Parrish, like Ronnie Fisher, who did the lamps. His sculptures were lamps, and he was very prominent in the early 80s. And he actually was commissioned to do all the outdoor lighting of the Kansas City Civic Center. Mm-hmm. And they're huge versions of sort of Buck Rogers kinds of lighting. And I didn't know you had him in the collection, so when I saw this, I thought I have to put it in there because he was a very good friend of mine, and I wanted people to experience his work again. because I also wanted to include Keith Saunier, who just recently died, because normally I have a kind of a prejudice against art you have to plug in, because I've been too exposed to that many times. Like one of my favorite artists was a Swiss artist whose works were machines.
Tangling?
Yes, and there are none in American museums.
Right.
I think the Modern has one that Rauschenberg gave him, but they never turn them on. So nobody sees them as they're supposed to be.
Well, his works are mostly mechanical, Tangling.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
But they have to be plugged in. They're big, and so then we have a lot of power outages. Mm-hmm. And so the same thing goes with video. So if you go into a museum and want to look at paintings, the next room somebody's screaming on a video, and it's very distracting. Bruce Nauman, I'm calling you out on that one. And so I wanted to include works from my collection that were from different parts of the collection, and then I wanted to include works from different parts of other people's collections. This little teacup of Roy's I wanted to put in because I had made a little teacup of my own, and he made this. This is only one of a set of real teacups that he made, but it was great to see it. And I also picked, Better Living Through Chemistry and his iconic brushstroke paintings. But these are things Roy does.
Right,
but
and the brushstroke was a base also for the sculptures that are outside.
But nobody, nobody picked him, so I thought, well, heck, I'm going to put him in there. And Valerie Jourdan, I don't believe I've ever seen here before, although she may have been in a show before.
We did have a show of hers in 2019.
I see, I didn't see it, but she was a terrific artist, and she was a good friend of mine in the 80s, too. So I kind of brought people out that I had wanted to see, and I thought had something interesting to say. And also, when I go into rooms where there's a lot of art, which is in museums especially, too, there's one piece by one artist and another by another artist, and maybe there are 20 or 30 artists in a room you have to go through to see the paintings. And it always reminded me of Paul Valery saying that museums were like orphanages, where all the kids are screaming for attention when you go in there. And you get that. It's hard to look at art that way, really, as an experience. You can kind of go through it as an index. But I wanted to create a thing where you could come in and actually look at the work, how it's made, what it says to you, what its meaning is freed up and has room to breathe. And since you had this show up for so long, I thought it was perfect to pick works that people could spend time with. So that's what I did. And a lot of the works I picked were works that also used industrial materials, because Saunier's are neons, and Ronnie's go from anywhere from colanders to, I don't know what those are. And it just there's a physicality to all this work that always appealed to me.
Can you specify a bit more what you meant with the works that you chose feel accomplished? They feel like they have a point of view. They're finished by themselves, and they express everything that the artist sort of could express. And can you go a little bit deeper into that with some of your choices?
Yeah, well, I tried to pick major works by each person. Mm-hmm. And I think that the wonderful thing about painting is that it holds the spirit of the maker through thick and thin. And it's not a dead image, it's not a dead thing, it's alive. And the transferal of the spirit of the artist to the work in a major work is intangible, and yet it's magic. That's why I sometimes refer to, my book on painting was called The Theater of the Object, because it has a theater to it. It has its own creative spirit, and each person that I've picked in here has a point of view. Every mark an artist makes is ideological. It's a point of view that they have and that they translate to the medium that they're working on. And I always used to say that if you saw 3 rocks on top of each other in the road, if an artist put them there, you would know it was art. Otherwise, it would just be 3 rocks on the ground. So you would stop and look if they did that. because there's something about the artist specifically doing something that carries a spirit that random things don't have. And it's totally different from craft and from any other kind of art. And it's there. Like when you think of music, music is there too and has that, but it's ephemeral. And you can never experience it without putting on the record or listening to it in reproduction. It's like a print. Whereas the art is a real thing. And it stays that way, and it's active, it's not passive. And that's why I kind of wanted to pick, enough art of each person to where you could experience the differences. Is that my pizza? Anyway, that's basically what I wanted to say. You can sit and look at these things, and you get something from them instead of a catalog. And a lot of the things in your collection were drawings or prints or only one thing. And so you see in the galleries here, people have a ton of work of a lot of people. It's very hard for me to look at those works unless I see one thing that was particularly interesting.
Right.
They're all so different. And that's where the orphanage comes in. And you can't pay attention to everybody screaming, that's just the way it is. But here you can actually sit and look at these things.
They talk to you. I
Yeah.
feel like they really do. And
they talk to you on different levels. The thing about art is that it should be able to be read and understood no matter what level your expertise or your knowledge of art is.
Right.
And the more you know about art or the art you're looking at, the more it will give back to you. But you don't have to know anything. All you have to do is look at the thing, and it will give you whatever you're able to receive.
And I think that's also very connected to the way, obviously, the way you work. There's many layers to your work. Let's take these two paintings in the back, right behind us. You often use industrial material. You don't use canvas. You use tar. You use vinyl. Can you talk a little bit about these two works that are from different series, from different moments in time? I guess the one to the right is from the disaster series, which I find extremely interesting, where you mix imagery of disasters with these beautiful, lush flower imagery.
The oranges.
The oranges, oranges, sorry.
Right. Well, they're two very different things, but in another way they're not. The one on the right with the oranges, it was a combination of the disaster paintings, of which you have some in your collection here,
Right.
and the florals that I did. And the florals that I made in the 80s at that time was all based also on the paradoxes of architecture and chaos, structure and chaos. So the bottom half of those paintings was always a manufactured or ceramic, or something that would be made. And the chaos would be the sort of the way plants spread out and grow. And so I put these together, and I used, one of the images I used, I silk screened on the vase, an image I used in the disaster paintings. It was a ferry disaster, I think it's the Netherlands, where they forgot to shut the door, and where they had the cars, and it filled up and it capsized with all the people on it. And then I wanted to sort of stress also that even disasters in the consumer society can be turned into a pot. You can sell it. And somebody had suggested what they wanted to make. I was making scarves. I made a few here. There was one here of flowers. And she said, well, what would we like to do, the one you have here, this sort of dark painting? And I said, I can't really allow you to make a scarf out of an image of Auschwitz. It's just not right. But that occurred to them to do that. And I realized that they can turn anything into a saleable object if they want to. So I decided that I would take a chaos, which would be the disaster, and make it the pot. And then that would be crammed full of a chaotic scene of the oranges. The early versions of those would be the smokestack that had fire coming out of it, and the fire would be breathing out, or cypress trees on fire, or cities on fire, things like that. And the one on the left, the big button, was a continuation of the florals, in which I decided to eliminate any kind of naturalistic attempt to create the petals or the softness or the drawing of the flowers, which I'd done many years. And I just devised a way to make it more like a plastic button that you would use on your clothes after a series of button paintings I made. And I just we polished it almost like a piano. And it's just simply on masonite, which is the structure all of these are made on. And you can see the drawing on the masonite is just from the sanding of the edges. They were sanding it so it would hold the tile, which I didn't put on this one. And I made a series of these too, all over different backdrops. And but it was to make a single image that was hard and manufactured, but was done by hand. But it was a floral image transformed into an iconic image. And then that sort of goes to these two, the mimosa pictures, which I used as just a flurry of field. And I used spray paint, silver and cement, and yellow paint. And you see the drawing through the yellow, which is transparent, and the others are hard. I'm still working on that series, and it's tied as well to the oranges. There's a lot of the images I use over and over again. Circles, I made domino paintings, I made domino dishes, like I made morning glories with the round circles for the centers. Mm-hmm. I used the circles a lot.
Please turn off your phone.
That's a popular guy. Anyway, so I mean, there's not much else to say about it. The structures themselves, I moved away from the wall, and they're held out by shortened gas pipes. And so they're like platforms, but that's part of the architecture of what would normally be a canvas, so that you can look behind the painting, and it's like behind the scene of a drama, and see how they're installed, see the wall of the building. It's all participating in the structure. And all of the paintings were made that way, and still are made that way. And they're kind of like, I had done a lot of stage work when I was younger, and I liked the idea of making a platform in which to pass whatever I was thinking on to the public, or oration. So instead of a soapbox, these are what those are kind of like. And also, I wanted all painting not to be illustration. I wanted it to feel like it was a made and a real thing now in the world. It's not just an idea drawn in, it's an actual thing. So if you think of mimosas and say, well, mimosas are not exactly like that, but they are now. And that's the way I approach these things. I wanted them to have sculptural weight as well. I think of them as sculpture as well as painting, but they're visual sculpture. They have a visual weight. And most people, when they look at those big ones, they always think, well, these must be very heavy, which they're not as heavy as you might think. But you get the feeling that you're actually approaching something that's architectonic. And it was Ronnie Fisher's architectonic lamp. And Valerie Jourdan looks like she does, patterns that are inside.
Patterns and decoration.
In buildings. Yeah. And I could talk about the other people, but they're behind me and I don't feel like turning around. But you get the idea back there too. And every artist has their own way of dealing with that. If they're thinking in that way. I'm in a show right now with Neil Jenny, who makes these elaborate frames. Mm-hmm. And Francis Bacon always insisted that his paintings be behind glass with gold frames. And that's the theatrics of the painting.
It's putting them on a stage. It's giving them.
It's giving you the distance to look through to the.
Yeah.
the drama of the image. And I eliminated the frames on the paintings, but people frame the drawings, which makes sense. Otherwise, you have to stick them on the wall with a pin, but or move them around because they're paper. But I want everything I do. I feel like it has to have the physical aspect that I feel I need as an artist, like a real person that you can hold, rather than something that you can just mentally calculate.
Right, and it's also an interesting combination of these very sort of industrial materials with a very sort of almost romantic sensibility of what's actually in the image. Mm-hmm. So it's a really interesting juxtaposition.
Well, most painting and most art is successful by the paradox it contains. So if you have
tension,
you have the structure being very strong and seemingly heavy, and the meaning that's on the front can be very ephemeral.
Right. I
did a series of smoke ring paintings, and I couldn't think of anything that I could have that paradox more, because mm-hmm. once you solidify with a thick mm-hmm. impasto smoke, you've kind of done something with that.
Yeah, you can almost smell the smoke. Can you talk a little bit about, you don't need to turn around, but you know what you did, your cup and the lemon that you have also chosen to show, the small sculptures. And these are from the 80s, I believe,
yes,
right?
Well, I did for a series, I did like the drawing behind there, the big black lemons, which also I did because of, they're stacked in there like they weigh a lot, and mm-hmm. they're held in there like crates. And I did paint a lot of paintings of lemons, mm-hmm. and small paintings of lemons and so on. And I decided to take, just to cast a lemon. It came out of looking at a Manet lemon, mm-hmm. that he had a little still life of a lemon. And I decided that I was doing tulips, and one of my friends who's an artist who's here tonight said, this was back 30 years ago, we were looking at the painting. He said, well, that's not so different from the tulips you're making, but it doesn't have the stem. And I thought, that's true. So I started embarking on doing these lemons, and some of them were quite large. And I decided to cast this. And once I did that was in the Museum of Modern Art show I had of the black lemons. Okay. And I decided to do a teacup. When I made some teacups for a company, and I decided to make a lead teacup, which reminded you maybe a little bit of Merritt Oppenheim's furry thing. But yeah. The saucer is sitting on a plastic outlet, and it has little prongs in the bottom, which you can't see, but that's what holds it onto. It's plugged in mm-hmm. to an outlet, and that's the base. Okay. So the idea was that the base of the sculpture is meant to keep it warm, mm-hmm. and. So I did that, and then I filled it with tar, which is what I was using at the time. So it filled up with tar. So I had a whole little tea set going there with tar and lead and everything else. I used a silver to the cement, the gray.
So again, that sort of contradictory element.
Yeah.
Did you continue that series, or are you still making these kinds
I
of
did
sculptures?
one with toast. It was actually toast.
Okay.
And I burned the toast. And I put the toast on a tile.
A real toast?
Yes, but once you burn it, it's carbon.
Yeah.
So it's totally safe. It's totally archival. And then the back, you put it on the wall with the same kind of little plug prongs on it. Those were the only 3 small sculptures I made.
Have you shown those?
I've never shown that one. It's in my collection, but these 2 have been shown. Yeah.
That's interesting.
These were additioned. Mm-hmm. I didn't addition that. Because somebody reminded me that Jasper Johns made a lead toast.
Right.
But they're not the same thing. But then I thought, well, if that's what they're going to think of, I'll just hang on to it myself. I don't like the idea. I was with Frank Stella once at Zeitgeist in Berlin before the wall came down. There was a big show. And he was in a room with his huge things. And above it was Baselitz, George Baselitz. Mm-hmm. He had big paintings, but George Baselitz hung his way up on the wall. And so somebody said to Frank, how do you like his paintings up there? He said, I think it's great because people will look at mine. You're down here.
They sure did.
They did, yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious about Donald Lipsky's Wunderkammer, whatever that is, with the shoes. I take it you know Donald.
Yes.
And did he tell you what this work was about?
No, I'd never seen it before. I like his work, and I think he's very good at this. He does a lot of outdoor sculptures,
Right.
public sculptures. I don't see very much of his small sculptures, but when I saw this, I thought it's terrific because it evokes so many things.
It does.
You know, and
it does. It's really curious.
I guess it's called a curio, and it can be. I mean, some people are visually moved to really physically, emotionally moved by that particular piece, and they see it as refugees or lost souls or people on their way to extermination. I can also see it as a traveling salesman or a magician, you know. I think it's a very quirky and interesting piece, and he's like that. I mean, he does that. He hits the nail on the head every now and then.
Yeah.
And I think it's important to put things in there that do that.
It certainly raises a lot of questions, you know.
It does. See, one of the few sculptures at the back is not very interesting.
No, you have to open it up.
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm curious about something that you have said at some point. You said, and again, talking about point of views, and because you said all of these works here have a point of view, and you have said a point of view is different from self-expression, and art is not about self-expression necessarily, but it's about a point of view. And can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, I like it because I used the Oscar Wilde statement that he said, unfortunately, we live in an age where people think that art has something to do with self-expression. And I don't think it does have that much to do with self-expression in a way, because a painting is being expressed as it goes. It has its own expression. And you wend your way through your work. The paintings actually guide you into what you're going to do. And they tell you when to quit, or when to keep going, or when it's not going anywhere better. Even if you may not think it's successful, there's no point in continuing. It will say, this is as good as it's going to get. And from that, you learn something that's outside of yourself. Mm-hmm. Much like you could say that, you know, your girlfriend or your boyfriend or your wife is a part of your self-expression. It isn't. Each of these things is its own self-expression. And it's nothing to do with your self-expression. It's nothing that you're doing to express your view of things, what your opinions are. They're, like I said, it's an ideology that you have. It's what you think painting should be, and what it should give you as the viewer, and what it should give you as the artist. And it's a relationship that you have with the other, and that's what makes it outside of you. Mm. So that's what I mean by that. Mm-hmm. I mean, you could say, I would like to express my dissatisfaction with this particular thing, and this is how I do it. But that's not the best art.
Right.
And I think one of the strangest experiences I had when I was in college is we had a show at the Art Institute of drawings of the mentally insane. And there was one, I don't know how to explain this in a way that's not going to be maybe a little risque, but there was one artist who did a kind of, almost like Motherwell's Spanish Elegy. He had these drawings, which was a penis in a vagina. It was very abstract. It was very erotic and very simple. And I thought, man, I wonder if I could make that, you know. And I tried to draw. I couldn't do that because he had the impulse, the crazy obsession with that thing that I wouldn't have. I couldn't do it. And you learn about that, you know, but you just can't, unless you're a forger, you can't do these simple things. It looks simple, but it isn't simple.
Right. Do you know the art of Adolf Wilfling?
No.
No. So anyway, also, he was in a mental institution in Switzerland and just created these most amazing works.
Well, you find that a lot in there.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they're in the mental institution because, good Lord, some of it you really don't want walking around. you know. But they're very interesting. They're very interesting. It's not the same thing that I'm talking about, but it's very interesting because those are self-expressions. You know, it's a very different thing, but they're crazy self-expressions. And that's another sort of interesting point. It's a different kind of art, frankly. It's not the same, but, you know, it's like, I always tell people when they say, my child can make these beautiful drawings, I always say, everybody's child can make beautiful drawings. And if you have a show of children's art, it's all going to look the same. And I feel the same way about graffiti. You can go all over the world, the graffiti looks exactly the same. And it's like children's art, because that's what it is. They do the same tags, they have the same things, they have the same bubble kind of stuff. And, you know, I don't like it, and I would like it to go away, but it's not going away.
I might disagree with you there that all graffiti art looks the same, but anyway,
well,
Banksy to me is different.
Go take some photographs all over the world of the graffiti all over the place, and you'll see you see one after another, which would be you would know who did it. To me, they look the same, but you know, I don't want to argue about it. But that happens to me, and I just remember going into a place, and there were two women I knew, and they said that this man had died who was considered the founder of graffiti art, and what did I think? And I said, well, I don't mind. I wouldn't mind if they all quit doing that. And she got all really angry, and I said, well, let me ask you something. Would you rather have a guy come over and put all that stuff all over your house, or have him leave you a Cy Twombly on the porch? And that was the end of the discussion for me. I mean, most people would want the Cy Twombly. They wouldn't want their house spray painted all over the place. It's always fine if it's on somebody else's house. Anyway. But that, again, it's like different kinds of art. It's a different kind of art.
Absolutely. I want to come back a little bit to the process of, or the collection of the Parrish. Were there surprises? Were there things that you thought we didn't have, or we did have, or what?
Well, I didn't, yeah, there was a lot of things that you had. I didn't know you had a Augustin.
You didn't?
I didn't know you had I didn't see
right
them.
In the next room.
I know, I didn't see them when I was looking through the thing. I mean, I didn't go to the warehouse or wherever you have all these things. I just did it through what I saw that you had. I didn't see the rider, that you had a rider. I didn't see a number of the Homers. I looked for those. I didn't see them online. I missed it, which is a good thing because, you know, I only had so much space.
That's right.
And I wouldn't want to just put one. I mean, the funny thing about riders, if you see a whole show of rider, it starts to not look so good. See, one-on-one rider is great. When we see a lot of them, you start thinking, I don't know, this looks a little gimmicky, you know?
It's funny you mentioned Ryder because we have two artists who chose him.
Yeah.
We have Richard Aldrich, who's up right now,
Yeah.
and earlier Michelle Stewart in there. And so, again, you know, you put the Ryder in completely different context with a very young artist, that's Richard Aldrich. You know, he's looking at the quirkiness of it all, and Michelle Stewart was more looking at the poetry, you know, the romanticism.
Yeah.
And for her, he was a modern artist at the time.
Yeah.
So again, you know, all these artists are putting these works in completely different contexts.
Yeah, Blake Lark did that too.
Blakelock,
He was like a little bit like that.
Yeah.
I think you can see a lot of Blake Larks and not feel the same way as you do when you see a lot of riders. Because riders, you know, a lot of them need to be restored all the time because they use tobacco and they slide down and they have to go in.
Ryder
And
put
redo
them in the oven. He baked them. He baked some of the works.
Yeah, well, they didn't come out like Vermeer.
Yeah.
Apparently, he baked his too. So, I like them, but don't get me wrong. I'm a big fan of Ryder, but I really love seeing them, you know, in just one-on-one.
Right. Right.
They're very odd.
They are. They are. They evoke very, very strange feelings.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was wondering if we should open it up to the audience.
Yeah, sure.
See if people have questions for Donald or for the process of Artists Choose Parrish. These are the last couple of weeks. Yeah.
So there's many artists that are very talented and they really don't become famous. What do you think in your life made you become a well-known famous artist?
I don't know. Fear of not being one. You know, but also I went you know, I went right from school to New York to be in the art world. And I was more involved with the art world and all the artists than I am today. The older you get, the less you spend with a lot of younger artists. But I came to New York with, I had the idea of coming from Chicago. A bunch of us had organized a gallery, which was a co-op gallery of artists. And we showed other people's works from all over the country. And I thought it would be very interesting to make a book or a periodical that the gallery would put out every year that would be a kind of journal or a how-to book of New York and California, different artists would write about their work. And it would be in this book. So you could pick it up at a newsstand. You could see what Ron Gorshaw was thinking of, or you could look at what Richard Jackson was thinking of, or Barbara Kruger at that time. It was all a list of different artists. Jack Tworkov was one I picked. And the idea was that every year would be a book where people could look and see what was going on. So I got to meet a lot of artists doing that. And that came out, and the other artists in the gallery saw that it was being very successful, so they wanted to do the next one. They didn't want me to do it. And I said, fine. You know, so the result was that they got into internecine squabbles about who would do it, and then they never did another one. But I was very interested in the art world at that time, and I was interested in curating works, and it was a smaller art world then, you know. And I can't really say what happens, why some people's work hit a chord and some people's don't. And some people do late, and some people burn out early. And sometimes it's just a question of context. There's no real answer to that question. There are a lot of talented artists. But the other thing is that if you're really a good artist and you're completely devoted to your work, it doesn't matter whether you become a famous artist. You should be content to make that art for yourself. And the obsessiveness of artists who do that, somehow they come out later in life. People see it, begin to see it with the obsessiveness of it. But they're, you know, Joseph Cornell was known slightly, but he was a recluse really, and his works, you know, started to build over years. The art world again was very different. There weren't that many people. There weren't that many galleries. There weren't that many outlets. There were actually magazines that when they wrote about your work or showed your work, that was a big boost. But we don't have those so much anymore, really. There's just so much stuff. And I was in 2 Whitney biennials, or 3. But the first one in 1978, the catalog to that biennial is like this thick. And it's like this big. It's just small. And it was a very different kind of way of looking at art. It was, in those days, the Whitney Biennial was what the curators thought was the most interesting art produced in the last 2 years in New York, or maybe a couple people in California, but it could include a lot of people. So as a young artist, I was maybe 30, and I was there with Ellsworth Kelly and Stella and Chamberlain and Carl Andre. So you're looking at these new works in the context of very, very good work. And today the biennials are very different. The catalog is like this thick. It's got thousands of pictures. It's huge. And most of the artists that get shows in there, they don't get that much traction outside the show, really. Some do, one or two, but mainly that just dissipates into the air. And so it's a different thing. It's a curator's show rather than judging the art. And, you know, I can remember that when I started to get really a lot of press and getting to be quite known, I had these incredible panic attacks because I was now thinking, you know, before I was in my studio doing these things, and now I was thinking, oh my God, I mean, I'm going to be competing with Goya. You know, I'm in this, now going to be in the league where people are going to be looking at your work like they looked at Velázquez or Goya or Kelly or Pollock. And I mean, all of a sudden, you have to start thinking in a different way. And it's very hard not to think that way. But now, I don't know what people think about.
So did that change? Did that change your approach to?
I don't know.
And I mean, I know we also know that.
I managed to get
galleries-
through it somehow, but
Yeah.
it was very, very shocking, you know, to have to suddenly not just be making, these things that I thought were what I thought, art was, and it turned out that that's what it was. But I didn't think in terms of the larger history of art. And I mean, a lot of the art that was so great, people are being canceled, a lot of those people.
Sure.
And I think it's a little bit crazy, but, I guess pretty soon they'll be canceling out all the cave paintings and, stuff from prehistoric times that they made, because it's not, who knows. But it's just crazy what goes on, and you just sort of wend your way through that too. But like, I'm just trying to say that, the art world was much smaller and much more insular. And people were fighting over ideas in there too. There were fist fights in all these bars over ideas, not like, just who had the most money. It was people, they didn't like the pop artists. They didn't like the pop artists, and they would fight with people who did that. And it was really interesting. I still think that's one of the things that's missing. I don't think that many people fight over their ideas of their art anymore. They fight to be in the right gallery. They fight to make the most money, have the biggest auctions. Auction houses did not take young artists. There were no auctions of new artists.
Did you ever get into any fights?
I only avoid bar fights. I have been in fights, but not since I was teens. Alcohol and fighting, to me, I lived with some motorcycle gangsters once, and I realized that they taught me that if you're going to be in a bar, always have a full bottle on the table, because if you hit somebody with that, it's going to be more effective than if it's empty. And I decided, I don't think I want to get into that.
Oh, dear.
Yeah.
As a follow-up to Dr. Command's question, what can you comment on an artist that becomes famous with a specific recognizable style is one path, and I'm an artist that changes his style every 10 years, 15 years, and maybe isn't as recognizable. Can you comment on the benefits of both and what do you think about it?
Well, as you can see, I think it's better to change your style. I think that, well, I guess it just depends on the art, For example, Ellsworth didn't change his art. And Pollock did change his art, but nobody liked the later work. De Kooning changed his art. Bryce Marden changed his art completely. I think it just depends on your point of view, really. If you're, like I said, most of your art is part of an ideological view that you have of what the art is telling you to do. And, if you start making, for me, if you start doing the same thing over and over again, it becomes rote. And I used to say to my studio helpers, that I would be working on something and I'd say, I cannot fail if I don't know what I'm doing. But once you know what you're doing, then it's hard to keep this energy and the freshness in a work, because then you sort of are then just refining something. And so I would say that from my point of view, it's better to change your work.
I don't understand what you said about self-expression. You say you're not expressing yourself in your artwork?
I'm saying that I'm not saying that I'm not expressing myself. Am I saying that?
Well, you quoted Oscar Wilde, who said, art is not about
But
self-expression.
I'm saying that the work itself is the expression, and I don't think it's self-expression. I don't think that I am trying to say that a flower should be this kind of thing. I think the the painting that I would make would say, this is the flower you're making.
No, not like on such a low level. I'm just saying, once you get to a flower, then you go in with it.
I don't know. I don't know. I don't think of it that way.
So like on this, you went above the top there.
Yeah.
With the black little thing there with the orange.
The orange is coming off? Yeah? Is that what you mean? Yeah, but that's the process.
That's the process.
Yeah, the process of those are when they were done with plaster embedded in the tile, and then they were filled in with plaster. So when I filled them in, they hit the edge of the painting and build up, and the tar too would build up on the edge. That's the process. These I don't use the trowel the same way, so I don't have the edges like that. You know, that's just the way they are. I let them be the way they're going to be. I didn't.
So it has nothing to do with you.
Well, it had to be me to do to make it, but it didn't have anything to me. I didn't know I was expressing that in the beginning. I wasn't saying I'm intentionally making this shape on the outside, no.
There's a question.
I just want to say thank you so much. Your philosophies on like self-expression and art is really insightful, just because I've lately been thinking a lot about the art world's intention, or the art world's perceptions of meaning versus intention within art. So I think what you have to say was really interesting on all that. I guess besides your disinterest in graffiti, I'm wondering what impressions you can share to us about like the new wave or the new generation of young artists that you see today.
I don't know. I don't follow that much of the new artists, really.
Any way do you think the exhibition reflects on what art could be nowadays, or what it once was, perhaps?
I don't have any idea what it could be. I'm trying to make the paintings I'm making now, I'm trying to make them what they're going to be, what they could be. I don't know what they're going to be. And I can't predict what anybody else does. What makes my paintings the way they are, is my influences of art growing up and my influences of the art world I grew up in. So I used pieces from the Arte Povera movement, which is using simple materials. I always used for many years. I just used linoleum and the industrial materials that came in that size. So I would make a tile is 1 foot square. So I would do 1 foot, 2 feet square, 4 feet square, 8 feet square. The way the masonite came from the shop. And I'd use the colors that came out of tubes. I didn't mix paints. I didn't do any of that kind of thing. And what you're asking me about the edges of the paintings, I believed in the process of what it would do, and it went off the edges. And in a way, they're very fragile that way. It's probably not the smartest way to do it, but that's the way they ended up. I wanted them to just follow what I was doing and have the gesture and everything else that just naturally.
Well, I think it looks really nice. I'm just saying, but you didn't make that decision.
No.
Really?
I made the decision to leave it that way.
Okay.
But, yeah. But I didn't plan how they would go off the edge and make those shapes. I mean, I did a lot of these, so I knew that it would happen. But they happen differently each time depending on how I did it. And again, the new paintings, like that one and this one and the ones I've been working on, don't have this go off the edge, because that's not part of the process. So I used things from systemic art. I used things from minimal art. I've used a lot of different things. I think of mostly the way I see art is a culmination of all of the ideas that I was involved in battling my way through the art world and through art in general, and what I looked at and what I responded to. I mean, John Chamberlain's crushed cars, that's something that I was interested in. And I didn't realize that César was doing that in France, but kudos to him. But,
So you have a lot of good friends.
yeah, well, you meet people, let's put it that way. But you can see things. I mean, you know, I had started collecting, it's funny, I've started collecting photographs of different artists that were influential to me. And one of the most influential artists that I responded to, that really, I was a student, and I was blown away by her art, and it made such an impression that it changed my points of view, and that was Eva Hess. And it was her show at the Guggenheim. So I have her picture on my wall of fame, you know, people that I liked, that it made an impact on me. But it's amazing how young they were, you know, because I don't see that so much now. But I'm not involved in looking at works that's going to infect me that way. I kind of know what I'm looking for, and I'm making the art that I know how to do or want to do. And
So what do you want to do?
well, I want the ones that I'm working on to get better. They're telling me things that I have to do to make it have some other direction, and I haven't gotten to that completely yet. But the great thing about a painting that works is that it's open-ended. It shouldn't be a totally closed system, so that it doesn't have anywhere to get settled, for example. The painting should say, well, maybe there's another way to do that.
I want to follow up a little bit on Alex's question, and especially,
Sorry.
you know, you touched upon that a little bit, how the art world has changed, you know, the commercialization of the art world. What would you say to a young artist who is starting out today?
I have nothing. I told somebody the other day, I don't think it's possible to have too many artists in the world. I want more artists in the world, really, and less of the other kind of people.
So you want more artists?
I certainly do.
Okay.
Yes, I do.
But what kind of advice would you give them?
I can only give advice if I'm looking at what they're doing. I can't give any advice about just general advice. I could quote Rodney Dangerfield, look out for number one and don't step in number two. But I don't have any other advice. You know?
Okay. Do we have, one more question.
You said very early on that you had you dabbled in theater, you made a scenic design?
Well, when I was younger, I thought I was going to be involved in theater, and I did a lot of theater. I did, I did act. First of all, I was acting, and I was in musicals. I was in summer stock that traveled, and then I went to Falmouth Playhouse in Cape Cod, and I was an apprentice there, and I did set designs and props, and I worked with lighting, and I did almost everything in it, and that's what I thought I was going to be involved in. I really believed in theater, but then I went to school, actually went originally to Chapel Hill because of their theater department. But when I got there, since I had done, summer stock and worked in theaters for 10 years before I went to school, I didn't feel like that kind of program was right for me. So I wanted to go into television and motion pictures. So we formed a co-op there, and we started making individual little films that we did. But I realized it was going to be too expensive, and that I couldn't make art without scrounging for money. And I didn't want to do that, so I went to the painting department. And that's where I ended up. Because then I figured I could do everything without anybody bothering me.
And once you established yourself as an artist, did you ever go back and work in the theater the way Matisse did?
No, I had several moments where I was really interested in doing that. I was very friendly with a playwright who was very famous at the time, and he had initially said, "Why don't you do the sets for Twelfth Night? We're going to do it on Broadway." I said, "Okay," but then he decided not to do that. And then Harvey Lichtenstein, who was at BAM when they first opened the Majestic, he said, "Why don't you call your friend and we'll give you the Mystic Theater. You can do what you want." So I said, "Hey, we got this theater. Why don't we do something?" He said, "Donald, it's in Brooklyn." So that's the closest I got to doing, So I've never really been able to make that crossover, as much as I would like to. I've never been given the opportunity to do it.
Have you had a piece that's been long and boring that you just never
No.
No.
Well, I know when I have to quit. Yeah, I know when they're done. Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of it, knowing when to quit. But I work on more than one thing at a time, so they can work off each other. There's a dialogue going on most of the time. There's certain things I've been wanting to do that I haven't done yet, but there's a particular image, and I'll do it, but I just haven't had time to do it.
When you say your particular image, is it something that you draw or experiment with?
Well, it's a little painting I want to make. I went to the Nicolas de Staël show in Paris, and I thought it was an abysmal show, frankly. I didn't like it at all. But there was one painting in there, which was a painting of a bowl of salad. And I thought, that's the best painting in the show. So I thought, I'm going to go home and make one. But I haven't done it yet. I never saw one. I'm surprised. I did a lot of fruits and flowers and things, but I never did salad. I thought that'd be a good one to do.
That's the next step.
Yeah,
Fruits
right.
and salad and
Just,
flowers.
yeah, salad paintings. So that would go. You had a bowl like that, and then you just have stuff coming out of it, the radishes and whatnot.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well,
Sure.
sure. One more
You
question.
said there are periods where you just took the paint out of the tube, and yet when I look at some of the stuff, the palette seems so remarkable, so uniquely yours. But did you really just
Yeah.
take unaltered color and
Well, it depends on what I was doing. A lot of the small works that look like that way, like the oranges here, that's just the orange from the tube. But I recovered it with tar, and then washed it all off. And so it runs down. You can see it running down. I scraped away the tar. The whole thing was black at one point. And I scraped it away, and then so it runs down for all the turpentine stuff, and it made that color.
how did you discover tar and all that?
Whoa. Well, that's in a book. But basically, I was doing linoleum tile, and was doing inlays, and I had some on the wall, and they fell off. And I thought, well, the glue, which was black, was not meant to be vertical. So I found a way I reversed it, and I started using this caulking tar for roofing. And that's what I started cutting into, and that's how I found it. And then I found that when I would take it away, at one point the mixture would make these sepia colors on the surface, and I learned that sepia is the seepage from tar. That's where the word comes from. And so I started making these pictures that had like these Turner-esque things on there. It's like the materials made that happen. And then they changed whatever they used to make the tar, and then it would make gray. It didn't have that anymore. And so like the one they have here, which is Auschwitz, it's gray, dried up there.
Very dark.
Some of the other ones are sepia. So when I was spreading the tar, I'd think, well, now I know where Jimmy Hoffa is. But then they go back and forth. It just changes, And a lot of times, the materials that I was using, they don't make anymore. So I have to find another way around it.
Well,
That's industry.
it's an incredibly generous talk
Really?
and revealing your process. And thank you for having us in your living room. I feel like
Yeah. Thanks for coming.